germ of freedom is in every individual, in anyone who is a human being. In fact, the history of mankind is the history of man struggling and striving for freedom. Indeed, the very apex of human achievement is freedom and not slavery. Chief Albert John Luthuli. I think we're living in very, very interesting times. You know, when I look at it, we have a lot of problems to solve right now. We've got issues with the ecology and environmental sustainability, climate change. We've got issues with water scarcity, food insecurity. People are wondering where we're going to get our next meals from in the coming years. We've got issues with energy, electricity, power. We've got ideological wars happening throughout the world, and you know, they range from cultural wars to religious wars and different forms of terrorism that we've seen hitting different parts of the world. I think we're really living in interesting times right now. And that is going to push us as a collective, whether you're South African, African, or whether you're in any other part of the world, that is going to push us to become a bigger and better humanity. And I think the question is, are we up for the task? All of the problems that we're experiencing right now are the outcome of lopsided development. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that something has got to change, right? Up until now, looking at how our current society and our current civilization has evolved and developed, we've really been focused on production and mass production of goods and services in a very linear, very left brain, very mechanical way. So the entire social system, everything from homes, communities to schools, has been designed to create human beings that think like this, that think in a very one-sided way. But the question is, going forward, is that what's going to get us to where we need to get to? An interesting way to look at it is from an integral theory perspective. Building on the work of Ken Wilber, integral theory has come to separate three lines or three ways in which we as individuals and people can actually develop. The first one is cognitive. The second one is self-related. The third one is capacities and talents, right? So if we look at cognitive, for example, cognitive has everything to do with the left brain. So that's the rational thinking, that's your judgment and evaluation, that's your ability to calculate, to reason, to comprehend, to retain, to keep things in your memory. If we look at self-related, that has everything to do with you, your personal identity, your needs, right? And the way in which you interact with other people, your morals, your ethics, your principles, your values, and your ability to be within a social system. If we look at your capacities and your talents, which is the third line of development, this was something that was really pioneered by Howard Gardner when he came up with 7 forms of intelligence, right? So we're talking musical, visual, your artistic, we're talking linguistic and verbal, your ability to communicate with people, all these different talents, the ability to use your body, right? Your kinesthetic line of intelligence. These are all different forms of intelligence which we can have, we can possess, and they can become a capacity or a talent. So if we reflect on these 3 lines of development, what we see is that coming up to today, the world has been focused on cognitive development. It's all been about theory, it's been about school, it's been about being able to reason, calculate, it's been about efficiency. But we're moving into a new era that's going to require much more multidimensional thinking in order to tackle the problems. It's going to require us to grow in terms of the self-related form of development. We're going to need to be able to become better individuals, better people, understanding ourselves more and understanding how to relate with one another more across cultural and geographic barriers, right? if we think of capacities or talents, formally, the talents and capacities that have been focused on are pretty much the rational, logical, mathematical capacities. Obviously because of industry, right? Because we had to produce. But going forward, we're going to need a lot more artists, a lot more entertainers. We're going to need a lot more people who are able to think naturalistically, who are able to think in a broad manner and solve world problems, taking into account all these different issues. So if you think about all of this, my view is that we need a reversal of an overemphasis on the reasoning mind. From my point of view, we need to become unreasonable. And this makes me think of something that someone very powerful, George Bernard Shaw, said, which really still rings in me today when I look at the world. He said that the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in adapting the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. And for me, those are words that carry a lot of weight, because if anything, George Bernard Shaw was definitely an intellectual, right? So he's not calling us to become stupid or to become inconsiderate or to become uninformed. He's calling for us to revolt against a prevailing paradigm that through reason limits our capacities to be the best that we can be in terms of us as individuals, in terms of our gifts, our capacities, our talents, in terms of how we relate to one another socially, globally, on an economic and relative scale. So for me, when I reflect on that, I want to call each and every one of you who's watching this video to become unreasonable. Not ignorant, not stupid like I said, all right? Not uninformed, okay? Not callous and not caring, but to be unreasonable in the sense that you should push and keep insisting on adapting the world to you. What your vision is for a better world, what you have to give the world, make sure that the world adapts to you. And from when I look at it, I see a better world. I see a world where people don't have to starve while other people are enjoying way more than they could ever use up, right? I see a world where if you've got a specific talent or specific gift, you don't have to toss it out and forget about it simply because you're not going to find ways of making money through it, right? I see a world where each one of us can be who we are and make a decent living from being who we are without having to subordinate that to the needs of someone else to just get richer and richer. So in order to really be unreasonable and take it to the next level, we need to step up. And we need to make sure that we embody at least these three principles, right? To be unreasonable means to be self-reliant, as in capital S. To be able to rely on yourself, to be able to trust your inward vision, and to be able to trust your own intuition, your guidance, your passion, your motives, and your own intelligence, and to run with it. And to trust it enough, not only to create a system or a business or a method of operating and of being that can benefit you from it, but to also change the entire system that inhibits you today itself. Second, I believe that in order to be unreasonable, take it to the next level, we need to be able to be unselfish, right? Selfless. So we need to be able to do selfless action. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that just in a minute. Guys, and lastly, if we're really going to take it to the next level, it's important for us to have courage, a lot of courage, to be brave, to have guts, to go for this new reality that we can create for ourselves on the individual level and that we can create for every other human being out there that needs our help. It's critical times for humanity. It's critical times for our planet. And we've got the capacity and the knowledge to do it. We just lack the courage, the belief to do it. And it starts at a personal level. You got to start with yourself and then your family, then your community, then your nation, and then the world. And we can all do it collectively together. So if we apply these principles to what has been happening recently and what we've seen very strong cohorts of young people around the world do to make a difference in their communities, we'll see that there was a lot of uprising amongst the youth recently. I mean, we saw that with the Arab Spring. We saw that in the UK with the young kids from the ghetto coming up and saying we want a better life. We saw Ava's host one of the largest 750,000 climate marches in the world. Recently, we've seen on my home turf the young students saying fees must fall. And when we look at these movements, we see a huge number of young people, a number of freedom fighters gathering for a contemporary change, right? On social media, online, on the internet. And these things are really facilitating a new way of approaching issues and getting our voice heard. But I really just want to caution us right there. You know, Zainab Tufekci, I believe that's her name, she did a very excellent research on social movements and their impact. And she reflected on the difference between social movements that were done before social media and social movements that were done after social media. And what I found very interesting was that she gave a talk titled Social Media Movements, Easy to Start, Hard to Win, something like that. You can Google it, look it up. But what she showed is after 10 years, after a decade of researching movements that were enhanced by technology and social media, was that they may arouse huge numbers of people to come together, but their impact is not lasting. In other words, it's very easy for us to sit in our homes, guys, and click like on a picture or click like on a comment or to get out there and start a Twitter talk or something like that from the comfort of our own rooms, right? From the comfort of our offices, from the comfort of the classrooms with no real danger in front of us. And sure, even if we extend that to a march and we all come together for a day or two, the impact is not lasting when on the ground we have not learned to pay the price for creating the world we want to create. When on the ground we have not demonstrated that we're self-reliant, that we're courageous, and that we're selfless. And let's take, for example, my home country, right? The movement that changed this country to become a democratic nation didn't have the benefit of the internet, of social media. There was a real risk. When the message was spreading across schools that the youth of 76 were going to create such an uprising so as to make the country ungovernable, all right, that had to travel through people, through families. People had to get on buses, trains, write notes, send letters, and do it very intelligently and avoid being caught. They took real risks, and they did it unselfishly, not for themselves, but for their people. And if you look at some of the greatest social movements that were ever created, for example, the movement that led up to Martin Luther King Jr.'s great speech, I Have a Dream, for them to organize that, they had to break into churches, schools, universities, just to print all the flyers to get the words out. And if any one of them were caught, they were risking imprisonment, they were risking being ostracized from society, they were risking really so much. So my message to us today is that as young people stand up and fight for climate change and fight for justice and fight against terrorism and fight against racial, religious, cultural prejudice, as we fight against poverty, inequality, let's think for a second. Are we truly unreasonable? Are we just sitting behind computers, making easy comments, or are we ready to go out there and fight the good fight in our lives, in our communities? I really want to just emphasize and repeat that the reasonable person adapts to the world. The unreasonable one persists in adapting the world to themselves. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable person, on the unreasonable you, on the unselfish you, on the courageous you, on the self-reliant you. And until we are that, everything we're saying is lip service. And if we're going to create this world of tomorrow, a sustainable world of tomorrow where everybody has got a say and everybody can be a part of this global village without being tossed out and being, left to sort of die simply because you don't have access to a formal economy, we need to be unreasonable, guys. And I believe 2016, going forward, is the time, and we can all do it. I'm out.